Ugh. One word, 3 letters. That's the Saints. And this is Inside Black and Gold. I am Jeff Nowak coming at you solo today. We haven't done a solo show in a while, so I'm going to have to get my kind of rhythm back in this whole environment. But we're going to come in here. We're going to talk about the Saints. Steve Geller is having some mechanical issues, was not able to join. That's why I appreciate anyone who stuck around. We had to push this back a little bit. I told him to stop going to those websites. He would not listen to me. And so here we are talking about Saints 10, Raiders 25. Yes, the 3-win Raiders, who suddenly looked like a dominant team the second they stepped foot on that Superdome turf. If you didn't know any better, you would thought that's what they do. If you didn't know any better, you would thought Amir Abdullah was a different guy, not the 10-year veteran who had never before run for 100 yards in 140 NFL football games. He did it to the Saints. So that's what we're here to talk about. It's going to be kind of I think it's going to be our final real post-game breakdown show. I think from here on out, we can pretend the season is over and we can talk about this team as if there are no games left to be played. I did want to break down this game in particular because I thought there were some things that happened that I want to talk about. I thought there was a quarterback that didn't play that bad, even though when I used the term solid to define his day, I got a lot of grief on Twitter about it. So we will talk about that. But so for this final stock up, stock down, that's what we're going to do. We're going to do stock down here in the first segment. We're going to talk about things that went really, really wrong. And then second segment going to be stock up, quote unquote, stock up. We're just going to talk about the things that only went kind of wrong. And then the final segment is going to be a mailbag as always. So make sure you get your comments, questions in there. We'll go through as much as possible. You know, I kind of want to talk about things that are not about this game. So if you have questions that you want to discuss, salary cap, coach, whatever, I'd much rather get into that than things that happen in this game. So keep that in mind as you're dropping questions and comments in there. And yes, we can talk about Mickey Loomis. Yes, we can talk about the front office. Yes, we can talk about what needs to change and what my hopes are for this upcoming offseason. But for now, let's talk about the game. So let's dive right into it. And let's just say, hey, stock down. What is the biggest stock down thing for the Saints this game and honestly this season? And I don't know if you can look at anything beyond, man, you know, what's the Rob Schneider? Is that from The Waterboy where it's just like, we suck again? And that's what I feel like right now defines the Saints defense. Like I had forgotten what it felt like to be watching a team field arguably the worst overall defense in the NFL. And I don't even know if that's true from a talent perspective, but it's definitely true from a statistical perspective. And I don't need to break it all down for you, but you saw it play out in that game. 25 points is probably the ceiling of what a Raiders team can put up in a game. And they did it in spectacular fashion, right? And there was no level of the Saints defense that played well in that game. There was no level of the Saints defense that played well against the Packers. And there's been way too many games this season where no level of the defense is successful, right? There've been some good games, some good moments, but what you have seen throughout the course of this season is just a slow, gradual, but consistent decline from everything that made the Saints defense good throughout the majority of the Dennis Allen era. And that's what I tried to tell people, like, okay, I want to fire Dennis Allen just as much as anybody else. But what you need to realize is things aren't going to get better. They might improve slightly. You might see some motivation, whatever. But the reason Dennis Allen had that job in the first place is he's a pretty good defensive coordinator, and they didn't want to lose him. And what you have seen over since week 10 is just this defense gradually fall apart at the seams. And we've seen it. I don't know. I've lost count of the Tyrann Mathieu temper tantrums I have watched. And they're merited temper tantrums from a 12-year NFL veteran going at his defensive coaches because he does not feel like he's being put in a position to succeed. And that's what you hear. That is what you hear from coaches. Their goal, I need to put players in positions to succeed. That's all they say. They repeat it over and over again. It's Joe Wood's mantra. If you ask them about this, it's on me. I got to put him in a better position. I got to do this. They're not doing that. The defensive coaching staff is not doing that. And yeah, the players need to play better. But man, I mean, the plan isn't good. The execution isn't good, but the game planning, the implementation, the practice, it's not working. I know Nick Underhill reported that Tyrann Mathieu was griping about, the intensity at practice, and it's not there, and it's not good enough. And all the teams he's played on, and this is true of a lot of players who have been on successful franchises and are now on the Saints, will say like, hey, we don't practice hard enough. All the teams that I've been on that were good were running hundreds of plays a day in practice. We're doing glorified walkthroughs every day, and we're still getting guys hurt. And Tyrann thinks that's why they're getting guys hurt. And I wasn't there for that interview. I was still in the press conference with Rizzy at that point when Tyrann was talking. But based on all the conversations I've had with Tyrann, that's very on par. He is not happy. He wants everything changed. And, I don't know. I don't know if Tyrann's going to be here beyond this year. I don't know what this coaching staff is going to look like next year. But, man, have you seen it. First downs in that game, the Raiders got 22 of them. They went 10 for 18 on third down. If you're 60% on third down throughout the course of a season, you're like a Super Bowl team, right? You're one of the best third down offenses in the history of the NFL. This is the Raiders. This is the 3-win Raiders with Aiden O'Connell at quarterback. He's not even their starter. Like, we can talk about all the injuries the Saints have. Man, the Raiders are down, 17 starters from the beginning of the season. They don't have any wide receivers. Like Brock Bowers, as great as he is, one of the reasons that he is setting these records is because they don't have any wide receivers. They went into the season with Devontae Adams as their star player, and Devontae was like, get me the heck out of here. They traded him to the Jets. He's worse off, but whatever. The Raiders don't have receivers. So the Saints' excuse of like, hey, on offense, we don't have any playmakers. We can't get anything done. Well, the Raiders are in the exact same situation, and they looked a hell of a lot better than the Saints yesterday. But it's not even the passing game that really, I think, is the issue for the Saints. It's the run game. It's the run game. You see Amir Abdullah going off for 115 yards on 20 carries, 5.8 yards a carry. First time in his 10-year career he has surpassed 100 yards, to the point that I was like halfway through the game, hey, is this a different Abdullah than the one I know? Have I been mistakenly calling this guy Amir Abdullah all week? And is this some other Abdullah who just showed up in the NFL and maybe is better than the guy I remember? And no, this is the same Amir Abdullah who was drafted in 2015 by the Lions and has never before had that level of success at the NFL level. Do with that information what you will, but we talked to Cam Jordan in the locker room. We'll have a lot more on Cam Jordan throughout the course of this episode. Maybe his last game in the Superdome as a Saints player, as an NFL player even. I don't know. Is he going to retire? He doesn't want to, but he may not have a choice if no one's willing to give him a job, so we'll find out. But, one of the things that Tyrann Mathieu has been saying consistently, one of the things that we've been hearing from Cam Jordan consistently is, again, like I said, all of these things that the Saints defense did well, 3 years, it's not that long ago, seriously, that the Saints went 3 full seasons without allowing a 100-yard running back, right? It was Samaje Perine for the Washington football team, I believe at that point. Maybe they were still the Redskins. I don't remember. It was in 2017. He went off for 100 yards. Fast forward to 2020 in a game against the Eagles, Jalen Hurts' rookie season. He and Miles Sanders both go off for 100 yards. That was the first time in 3 years the Saints allowed a 100-yard rusher. This year they've allowed 6 separate 100-yard rushers. There's still a game to go. And one of those 100-yard rushers will be on the Bucs staff roster when the Saints go out there. So, hey, maybe it's 7. Maybe he can get even closer to double digits. I don't know. Hey, maybe allow 200-yard rushers. That's something you haven't done yet. But this is Cam Jordan kind of going in on that idea yesterday in the locker room after, what was one of the more frustrating losses at the tail end of one of the more frustrating seasons that he can recall since coming to the Saints in 2011.
Gone through this season and being here for the high points. Going forward, looking forward for this team, what do you guys feel like from a player level you need to be like as successful as you guys want to be like in the next phase of this?
I mean, us is like the Pelicans. We just have to be healthy to assess. You say your first 2 games, everybody was like, oh, we're clearly going to take over the world. And then by game 4, wide receivers down, quarterback down, offensive line, your starting center down, one of the corners down, maybe both corners down. How do you assess where a team is if you're never fully healthy? It's sort of tough to beat one of these top teams filled with enormous talent when you're always gutted, When you try and develop defensive linemen early on in training camp and you don't have the right tools given, there's plenty of things you can look at in the season and say, man, I wish BY had been the coach from jump, wish I would have, whatever it is, even taking out my personal bias of how I should have been used or how we could have been more effective, is, it starts off with just the effort given, the respect or lack of respect that we needed to pay attention to the minutia of it all. If all we care about is at the beginning of the year is sacks, pressures, and you see the yards per carry go up, you're getting away from what made us good for the last 5 or 6 years. We get back to it, see success, and then we start missing tackles. There's always going to be something that, again, it's always been about us. So I don't really care about what the world thinks or what the world has in terms of point spreads, because I never wanted to understand that stuff to begin with. I think that, again, when the Saints play our way, we play our football, when everybody's going on full cylinders, we've been a force to be reckoned with, and that's what we have to do. We have to find our way back to being a problem for the league and not just an opponent.
Yeah, I've heard a few people say, we're getting away from things that made us successful in the past. So why do you think that happened this year? And, when did that become?
Don't know, but it got here. Again, when you look at how talented the roster was at the beginning of the year, and you go to the middle season and you can't find half of that talent, that's a problem. And that's part of the game, though. The game has always been next man up. We just have to go into this offseason and try and be the best versions of us that we can be. We got one more game to show grit. Is that what we're showing at this point? It's 6-11. 6-10. 6-11. 5-11. I'm just claiming the 6th win. We have to find our way. So whatever that takes.
Sorry, I bungled that transition there. But yeah, so that's what Cam is talking about, right? There's so many things that this team used to pride itself on that it no longer does. And it's, one thing that Cam has not shied away from is not a fan of Todd Grantham. Not a fan of Todd Grantham at all. And, it was funny when Darren Rizzi took over, one of the first things he did was transition Todd Grantham out of the defensive line coach role into a senior defensive assistant role, helping out Joe Woods. And I have some feelings about Joe Woods, but we don't need to go into him here because Joe Woods is, I would bet any sum of money, going to be out of a job in 2 weeks. So we don't need to pile on any more than that. But, one thing that it was funny when Darren Rizzi sold that movie, he's like, it's not a demotion. It's not a demotion. We just wanted to help out Joe in his defensive coordinator role because he's down a defensive coach. So we'll make Brian Young the defensive line coach. And, the speed with which Todd Grantham got out of the building, he's now going to be the defensive coordinator for Oklahoma State, tells you that was, as much as I appreciate Riz, and I think Riz has done as good of a job as I could hope in that interim role. I mean, to be honest, it's not a good scenario. I think he's handled it as well as you could hope. It was a demotion. It was okay. These guys do not want to play for this guy and as their position coach. And so we're going to go with Brian Young and we're going to get back to the basics and we're going to start to, see some results. And they did. Right now, the last couple of weeks haven't gone as well, but I mean, we're 2 weeks removed from 8 sacks against the Commanders, so it hasn't been all bad. But I just think that from a run stopping perspective, I've said this a lot. If you go back in the history of the NFL, you will never find an elite defense that's getting gashed on the ground constantly. It doesn't exist. And the Saints have had glimmers of a defense that could get the job done, but then every time you need them to step up and get a stop, they can't. They cannot stop. They cannot stuff the run. They cannot take away the middle of the field. And you see things happen like yesterday, like Aiden O'Connell carving them up in the Superdome. And it's frustrating. And you could see players on the sideline like giving up. And I don't mean that they're just not playing hard anymore, but like you're demoralized, you're deflated. I watched Colin Saunders, a guy that always plays with elite energy. Like, say what you want about Colin Saunders. He's a guy who always goes out there and plays at 100%. And it's not always easy to do when you're a 300-pound lineman. You get tired. There was one play he made in that game that I think he and like 3 other NFL defensive tackles make, because you need it's rare to see a defensive tackle get to the edge of the field and get a tackle for loss at the line of scrimmage near the sideline. That's a long way to run for a 300-pound dude. And he did it. And there have been multiple times this year that I've seen him make plays, I think, because the offense doesn't realize he can get there as fast as he can, but he's always willing to put in that extra effort. And I watch him walk to the sidelines late in that game and just say, I'm done with this shit. That's a direct quote. I'm done with this shit. And he just sat down, just put his helmet down. It was like, there was a point that I wasn't sure if he was going to go back in the game if he was asked. And we would end up in that situation the 49ers found themselves with Devondre Campbell just walking off the field, or Deontay Johnson, the receiver for the Ravens, who refused to go in the game. Like, I thought maybe we would end up there. And it was right before the final interception where, like you'll see an interception and all the defensive players are just like, but then they grab their helmet, they go run on the field. Colin kind of just sat there. And I was like, is he not going to go in the game? But he eventually got up and got back in there. But like, if that's happening to him, if he is unable to get it emotionally invested, then something's wrong. So I don't know. Like, there's a lot that needs to change with this team. If you can't get the defense back on track, there's not much even worth talking about. So we'll see how things go against the Bucs. I fully expect the Bucs to blow the Saints out in that game. I don't see a scenario where the Saints show a lot of heart, because I mean, and I won't even blame them for it. Like, this is just an ugly season, and it's been ugly from start to finish. But I actually, it hasn't been ugly from start to finish. It's been ugly from like week 5 on. The first 4 weeks, it was like, man, okay, this team is competitive. We got something here. I mean, and no, not much since then. And like Cam said, a lot of it's due to injuries, but I feel like that was the case in the middle of the season. That was the case with the 7-game losing streak. Now you're seeing a team that's kind of lost hope. And once that happens, you're if you hadn't already fired the coach, I think you would be firing the coach. You've already done it. So there's really not another lever to pull, but one way or another, here you are. And this is Darren kind of talking about that same situation when I asked him after the game.
Defensive side of the ball, you're sensing frustration. It's 2 games in a row, these long drives. I think it was a 17-play drive again today. It's just not being able to get off the field. How has that been affecting that group?
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody. I mean, we get into third, medium, third, long, and then all of a sudden the offense is up and the punt return team is up, and all of a sudden, boom, they convert. And so it's it's certainly deflating at times, for sure, when they're converting third downs. And it was the same story last week. We got into some third and mediums and longs, and then we had some penalties and things like that turned those into third and shorts. It happened again today. And so there's no doubt about it. It's definitely frustrating. And listen, they I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were out there for 70-something plays, and we were out there for 40-something plays. That's a result of that. That's a result of not being able to convert, not being able to get off the field. So that's why I said in the beginning of this presser, I thought the pretty simple answer today. Not a really. You have to do a deep dive on today's game.
Hold on. Man, I'm really bungling these transitions. I apologize. There we go. Normally I have Steve to kind of talk as I figure out which buttons to press, and that's why I'm having all these difficulties, because Steve's not here, and so I'm trying to think of what I'm saying and press the right buttons. It's just not working out for me. And you could say the same thing about the Saints defense. A couple of their downs. And we these are all the same things I've been talking about, so I'm not going to spend a lot more time on it. But you had 10 penalties for 85 yards in this game. If you include the yardage that was negated on penalties, you're talking about 166 yards of offense in a game that you only had 269 yards. I guess it's not offense, but you had negative 166 yards essentially when you include the penalty yardage and the yards negated in a game that you had 269 total yards, in a game that you only ran for 81 yards. And keep in mind, there was a couple more penalties. Right, there was a long pass interference penalty on Ugo Amadi, who I thought had a really rough game, and he's kind of showing you why he's a backup and not a starter. that they didn't accept because they caught the ball anyway. So I mean, this could easily be 11 penalties for 100 something yards, and you're just not going to win games that way. We're going to get more into this when I talk about Spencer Rattler, but the penalties and the plays negated to me is like as big of a reason of why I didn't come out of that game as negative on Spencer as I could have, because it's like you didn't give the kid a chance. And I guarantee Darren Rizzi's going to talk here in less than an hour, and I guarantee you he's going to go up there and say, I went back and watched the tape, and I thought Spencer Rattler played pretty well, and we let him down at basically every turn, whether it was balls getting punched out, whether it was just straight drops, whether it was penalties negating huge plays. I don't know, man. I don't know. And this has been repeatedly happening time after time after time. Again, it's just tough because it's like, this kind of melds into my final stock down, which is the status quo. And I know a lot of people are saying, hey, I don't want to continue the status quo. There's going to be decisions to be made above the coaching hires. But I think what these last two games have really underscored is, no, you cannot run this back and pretend that it's peachy keen, that there's hope, that you have a scenario that you can just say, okay, but we like this. Let's do it again. No, that's not there. But and maybe that's a good thing. That's one of the things that I've been thinking about all day is like, hey, people wanted this. Like, I remember last year, I was like, man, I wish they would just lose. I wish they would just be bad enough to force change. Well, that's happening. You're getting that rebuild, whether you like it or not. And that's the part of it that I kind of find funny because, what do you think a rebuild's going to be like? It's going to be a lot more of this. And I don't blame the Saints at all for trying to stave off this point for as long as they did, because this is not fun. And there's no easy way out of this. And I think to an extent, you've seen them start to lean into that. And I understand why they didn't want to when Sean Payton left, because it was like, hey, we don't want to just give up the ghost here just because Sean left. I believe in our guys. I believe in this. Maybe you with hindsight, you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have believed in those guys. It didn't work out for you. But I understand why they didn't just want to be like, well, Sean's gone. Let's tear it all down and start from scratch because we're hopeless without him. No, you can't operate that way. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, yeah, you should have just cleaned up the cap, done what you had to do, started Jameis Winston, started a young quarterback, taking the hit for a year, and now you would be where you're probably going to be in 2 years right now. Instead, this is where you are. But I do think going into this season, you did start to see like people like, oh, clean up the cap. What do you think not signing any free agents is? What do you think only signing people to 1-year deals is? Like, you brought in, you needed linebacker help. You went and got Willie Gay on a 1-year deal. You needed D-end help. You went and got Chase Young on a 1-year deal. Like, look around at the Saints contracts and tell me who they went out and got last offseason that isn't going to be gone, or at least isn't probably going to be gone this time next year. Like, there aren't any. So that is the product of cleaning up the cap. And that's why when you say, oh, we don't have any depth, it's a big part of it. There's the draft, and then there's that. There's not bringing in that veteran help to help you survive these rough times when everyone's hurt. So I think that's it, right? Like, you started that process this year, and you're going to continue that process. And there's going to be a lot of conversations we have about what they need to do with Derek Carr's contract, what they need to do with Cam Jordan, what they need to do with Tyrann Mathieu. But you are in a situation where you're starting to climb out of that. And now with the record being what it was and the result of this season being what it was, you're going to lean even further into that. But it's got to be that, and it's got to be draft asset management. And I've talked a lot about this, but I appreciate what the Saints have done this year in particular, and honestly last year, with not leveraging future assets for the now. And so you're going into this draft with multiple third-round picks. You're going into this draft with all of your original picks in the top 5 rounds. So, what when you look back and say, how did they climb out of the depths in the past? 2006, you made all those picks. You hit on a lot of them, right? And you were able to build a core that you could establish, and then over the course of time, turn that into a winner. What did you do in 2017? You made all those picks. You hit on a ton of them, right? All those third rounders. When's the last, like, you haven't had multiple second, third rounders in recent years. You had that 2 firsts in 2022, but that was more of a kind of have to do this than like necessarily, okay, whatever. And that cost you a lot in the mid rounds to go do that. So this year, I think you're in a good position in terms of you have avoided making any long-term mistake contracts for this season. And you have turned a player into some reasonable assets in Marshawn Lattimore. You are in a decent position with some of these veteran contracts that you can start to move on from them. And you have draft picks that you can start to reshape this roster. So independently of the coaching hire or whatever front office moves you need to make and should make of whatever restructuring you need to do, I do think that this process is further along than a lot of people are giving it credit for. The teardown that people are looking for, it started to happen at the beginning of this year. And this season is at least somewhat a product of that. So, like I said, this is what people were asking for. This is what you got. You are a bad football team, and that's what it takes to force change. And here we are. So that's actually a stock down segment, as positive as I may have kind of tried to put a spin on it. The stock down is in anything that went on the field yesterday, feeling like we have to run this back because it's not working. And that's where we are. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. Again, I'm Jeff Nowak. This is Inside Black and Gold, coming at you solo because Steve can't log into his computer. True story. And I'm just trying to make it work here. We're going to come back and we're going to try to, as always, and I know this annoys people sometimes, but I think people out there appreciate it, so I'm going to keep doing it, even in the darkest of times. And this is a dark time. I'm going to try to find some positivity, right? And there are a few things in that game that I'm coming out positive on. So let's talk about it. Again, Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. We're coming down on the end of year 3. And I don't know, we've continued to grow. I feel like people have appreciated the podcast. We get some complaints, and I listen to them. I try to make changes where I can. One of the things that we get complaints about a lot that I find weird is that the podcasts are too long. I personally believe that if I am enjoying listening to a podcast, I don't want it to end. So I don't know. If someone telling me that podcasts are too long means they probably weren't enjoying it in the first place. So I almost feel like there's a secondary complaint that I'm not hearing because they're just like tired of it. And so like those are the complaints that I'd like to hear, because I don't know. We get on here. I'm not in any rush to stop talking. It's free content for y'all, and it's therapy for me, I feel like, at times. So we're gonna keep doing it, but we'll be coming back. Stock up, quote unquote, Inside Black and Gold. Hit the subscribe button, leave a rating, leave a review. Tell me how annoying it is that these podcasts end up being 90 minutes, and we'll do what we can. But all right. Otherwise, stick around. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I say we, it's just me. I'm Jeff Nowak, coming at you after the Saints lost to the Raiders 25-10 in a game that didn't really feel that close. So one comment I'll bring out here. Teddy Bear says TikTok brand. I think he's referring to me talking about how people say the podcasts are too long. It's funny. I think that is the case sometimes on YouTube, because people are like, man, I'm watching a video. I don't have that much time to watch a video. Whereas a podcast, a lot of times, like, I'm driving in my car. I'm in no rush for this to end. I kind of just want to make sure it gets to the end of the drive so I don't have to pick another one. But the most recent complaint that it was too long was actually on the podcast feed, which I found odd, because it was like, what? I've never felt like if I'm enjoying a podcast that it ended and I'm like, man, that went on for way too long. But maybe people just have a lot of podcasts they want to listen to, and I'm just taking up all their time. But either either way, we're going to get into it, and we're going to start to roll in to the positive, quote unquote, positive side of the agenda. And yes, I used the words agenda there as a segue into. I didn't think Spencer Rattler played that badly, and the word I used on Twitter, which I did not think was going to cause any havoc, was solid. I thought he was solid, and people were like, "He wasn't solid. He threw 2 interceptions. He only had 1 touchdown. He did overthrew the ball and blah 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 blah." And I get it. I don't think we need to be litigating whether solid is a reasonable word to use about a rookie quarterback who had the offense implode around him. I think that just kind of indicates how bad things are right now. But I get it. On its face, you look at it and you say, well, he didn't play well enough because they lost. And I get that. I do get that. But when you go back and you watch that game, I did, let me kind of walk that back. Spencer Rattler has now made 5 starts. That's a rarity for a 5th-round quarterback to make 5 starts. It's only happened 4 times since the NFL AFL merger. And I did look this up. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. So you have in 2011, DJ Yates, 5th-round rookie quarterback, started 5 games for the Texans. He went 2-3. In 2004, ready for this name? Craig Krenzel with the Bears started 5 games, went 3-2 as a rookie. 1975, Steve Grogan for the Patriots started 7 games as a rookie, went 1-6. That's it. Since the AFL NFL merger in 1970, only 3 5th-round quarterbacks have started 5+ games, and that's a pretty crazy number when you think about it. Now, what did all those quarterbacks do? They all won at least 1 game. That is what Spencer Rattler has not done, and this was probably his best chance to do it. I think he's probably going to be the starter against the Bucs. It would be weird at this point to go back to Derek Carr. I thought, hey, if Derek's going to get back, it's going to come in this game against the Raiders. Sorry, I got a phone call. And, and this is purely my interpretation. As I was walking out of the building yesterday, I kind of walked by Derek and I said, "Hey, what's up, Derek?" And he kind of just looked at me and he gave me a look that I interpreted as "You guys miss me now, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." I can understand feeling that way. When you look at what's gone for the Saints this year, they've won 5 games. All 5 of those were when Derek started. They are 0-6 in games that he did not start, and a few of those were a couple winnable games, in my opinion. But either way, you go and you look at Spencer Rattler's start, and I think if you separate the first half, which you can't, but if you separate the first half, it was, in my opinion, the best half of football he has played in his rookie season, and that's by a long shot because that Bucs game, that second quarter, I really don't give him a ton of credit for it. Now he did execute, but these were short yardage drives. He had 1 long drive. There was a punt return for a touchdown. The Bucs were kind of on their heels that entire quarter, and they dominated the rest of that game. You look at this game, and he kind of made it happen for the most part in the first half. Obviously, that trick play worked, and you give him credit for the throw, but it was more so just the play design. This is an offense with not a great offensive line. This is whatever. But in those first 4 starts, I looked at Spencer Rattler, and I saw a lot of people giving him excuses for why the Saints can't win these games, with the injuries, with the lack of weapons, with whatever. And I was still hard on him because I didn't see a quarterback who was playing well enough that even if things were going perfectly around him, was capable of winning those games, right? That was the difference to me, is in those first 4 starts, you could have had perfect offensive play independent of the quarterback. And I didn't feel like he was playing well enough to go win you a game. In this game, I felt like he did play well enough to win that game. I thought Spencer played more than well enough for a Saints victory to occur. And this was the first time that everything around him was a far bigger issue than Spencer himself. And I'll point you to 3 plays. And we already talked about the penalties and all the negated yardage, but the 3 plays that changed this game entirely and put at minimum 13 points up on the board, in my opinion. Second quarter, 39-yard completion to Juwan Johnson down to the 1. I want to say Fuaga gets called for a hold. I wrote these down, but I don't have them in front of me. Fourth quarter, Spencer rolls out from pressure, completes a 16-yard pass to Cedric Wilson for a first down to the 33-yard line for the Raiders. This is early in the fourth quarter when this was still a ball game. Ollie Udo, hold, called back. So next play, what happens? Spencer rolls out from pressure again, tries to hit Cedric Wilson, overthrows it, tipped up, interception, right? So that interception doesn't happen, in my opinion, if you don't eliminate that very positive play from Spencer's day. And again, as a rookie, you have to look at that stuff, because I'm not talking about this in the sense of like, hey, we're going to the playoffs or what. What I'm talking about is this guy playing well or not. Later in the game, you hit a nice ball up the seam to Juwan Johnson at the 4-yard line. OPI called back. And I don't know, I disagree with the call, but either way, none of these plays were indicative of a quarterback not playing well. It was indicative of an offense not playing well. There was one series that first play, pressure off the edge, Spencer escapes, gets the ball out, targeting MVS. Adam Prentice dives in front of it, like Manny Ramirez style from Johnny Damon. If anyone gets that reference, I don't know if anyone gets that reference, but I get that reference. There was one play where Johnny Damon was trying to throw the ball in the infield, and Manny Ramirez out in left field dove in front of it. And it was like, what are you doing? It's one of the dumbest things you've ever seen in a baseball game. Google it. It's hilarious. That's what it was. Adam Prentice dove in front of a ball that was targeting MVS. MVS was open. That's a big play. Doesn't happen because the fullback screws up. Next play, immediate pressure off the right edge. Spencer avoids the pressure, gets it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Ball gets punched out. Instead of a first down, you're looking at 3rd and 10. Next play, Jamal Williams whiffs on a block, immediate pressure up the middle, doesn't have a chance to escape, 10-yard sack, drive over. Is that bad quarterback play? What is he supposed to do? And that's where, again, I'm not saying this after that Packers game. I don't think he played well in that Packers game. I wasn't saying this after the Broncos game. I wasn't saying this after the Chargers game. I am saying this after this game because that was what happened in this game. First drive, he hits a great ball up the seam to Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson was a couple plays away from having a monster game. He ended up your leading receiver with 6 catches for 66 yards. He was a couple dumb plays away from it being 8 to 9 catches for 100-something yards and a touchdown, right? So again, all this is to say, in what was otherwise a just disaster, get me the heck out of here. Can we have a running clock in the second half type of game? I felt like Spencer took a step forward, and he should get credit for that. Now, he's not going to get a lot of it because of how the game went and the result and the fact that it was the Raiders and whatever. It was a lesser defense, and I think that helped. But I saw a guy who looked a lot more confident. He looked calmer in the pocket. He got the ball out. The snowball started rolling in the second half, and he was unable to stop it. And at the end of the game, you saw a guy trying to make things happen, and they didn't. And there were some rookie moments. There was one play where he just didn't see, what's his name, Spillane, the linebacker, Ricky Spillane. I think his name's Ricky. He was showing he get pressure. Spencer saw that, thought he was going to come. He dropped. Spencer didn't react to it in time. Threw the ball to Foster Morrow. Should have gone to Juwan, but he threw it to Foster instead, right into Spillane's arms. Spillane dropped it, right? So that's a rookie moment. That's a mistake. Should have been an interception. He got away with it. So there were moments like that too. But this is a rookie quarterback in his 6th career start in an offense that, Derek Carr, who I think has actually, in retrospect, had a very good season, considering what he's been playing with, could not make things work most of the time. So, I don't know. Again, the word I used was solid, and I still feel good about it because I think Spencer had a solid day, and you're going to go from here. I still don't think it changes anything for you from a draft perspective. I think if you're sitting there at 10, which most likely you're going to be sitting there at 10, and a quarterback you like falls to you, I'm pulling the trigger. Because as nice as I'm trying to be to Spencer, this was a step forward. This was not a leap forward. This was a step forward into the, okay, you can at least, compete with the Raiders at the NFL level. So that's kind of where I am. And that's where I'm going to wrap up that stock up item, because there are a couple more things I do want to talk about, even though that went on forever. The other two, this is going to be quick. I meant to play audio there from Riz, but he said the same thing I did. So he basically said like, hey, we didn't give Spencer a chance, and that's where we'll go from there. I did see Spencer get frustrated throughout the course of the game. He talked about that too. So I do want to play that clip, and this is Spencer talking about his day and how he needs to kind of manage his frustration a little better.
Do you feel like personally yourself getting more and more frustrated as the game was going on, and does that play out in your performance? You know what I mean?
I mean, everybody's frustrated. Just keep going. Couldn't catch a rhythm really in that second half. Third quarter, fourth quarter, couldn't catch a rhythm. Shot ourselves in the foot multiple times throughout the game. And I mean, yeah, it's frustrating, but you gotta have good body language. I mean, there was certain times I could have definitely been more, not showing as much frustration, but it's tough, and I just try to keep the guys up. It's not like we're going out there just to go 3 and out every time. And then obviously there in that fourth quarter into third quarter, it's tough being backed up when they're playing soft and then teeing off, and drop back knowing we're going to throw. So. A lot of areas we need to clean up overall. I thought we did good in the first half, obviously not in the second.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it does come down to that. One of the other things in this game, I didn't think the offense was called particularly well. Like there was a point where they were just like, hey, let's run that trick play again, see if Cedric Wilson could throw another touchdown. It didn't work this time. When you're calling multiple trick plays in a game, your offensive coordinator is a little frazzled, because there's just no way you're expecting 2 trick plays to work for touchdowns in the same game. Anyway, but a couple other things I thought went well. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, again, this is okay. Let's be real. 5 carries for 20 yards. Also had 2 catches for 10 yards. But I don't know. I thought he had some juice. When you consider he hasn't played in a game this season, that was his first game of the season. He's not in shape. I mean, how can you be? He's as in shape as you can be, but you got to play to be in shape. And so I don't know. I thought you saw some nice things. He had one of those nice spin moves that I remember so well from LSU. I didn't see a guy who doesn't look like an NFL running back. He looked just as explosive as I've seen Jamal Williams look in any game over the last 2 years. So we'll see. Kendre Miller went to the concussion protocol. It's frustrating, but I just can't bring myself to be down on a guy because he got concussed. It's not like he wanted to go into the concussion protocol. So it's frustrating, but it is what it is. We'll see if he can come back for week 18. If not, I don't know. Let's see what Clyde's got. Again, it's like, what do you have to lose? I would be stunned if Alvin Kamara plays. I'm sure he wants to, but that's asking a lot. So I don't know. If he becomes a guy that you look at and say, let's give him a shot in training camp next year, that's probably as much as you could have hoped for. He's fun. It's a fun story. Like he's a local guy. He's never really been able to find his way in the NFL, even with a couple Super Bowl rings. It's kind of funny to talk about and say like, oh, he's struggled, but he's got 2 Super Bowl rings and a national championship in college. But he was a first-round pick for a reason. This is not an offense that has running backs that you're like, oh, there's no room to crack into that rotation. So we'll see. But either way, I don't know. I can't come out of this negative. I'm really fishing for some positives, and to me, that's one of them. The other positive I have, and it's not even really about the game, it's just, hey, Cam Jordan, I don't know if his career is going to end. He told me that he doesn't really want to retire. Like, that's not something he's anticipating for himself. He wants to play through year 15 and maybe even beyond. Like, he looks up to Calais Campbell, a guy who's 38 years old and still going strong. He's on the Falcons now in year 16 or 17. Like, he kind of says, like, hey, if he can do it, why can't I do it? I do think you've seen him play well, right? Since week 10, when he kind of got reincorporated into the rotation. Like week 9, he had a career low in snaps. He has never before been active for a game and gotten 12 or fewer snaps. And that's what happened in week 9. That's part of the reason. If you saw that video of him kind of pacing after the game, like in frustration, like he's like, we're getting beat by the Panthers and you won't even put me on the field. Like I can't even get involved here. And I understand the frustration there. Since he's been worked more into that rotation, he's delivered. He's got 4 sacks, which is just as much as anybody else. He had a sack in that game. The only sack in that game was by Cam Jordan. He's got 20-something tackles. He's always going to be a run defender. So, I don't see a guy that can't contribute. But are the Saints going to bring him back? I don't know. So, he treated that game as if it was his last game in the Superdome, and I don't blame him, because you go into an offseason with this level of uncertainty, and you can't take it for granted that you might get another opportunity. And one of the things that was cool, and I'll play the video for you here, is after the game, Cam kind of spent I don't know, minutes or so, going around the perimeter of the field and signing autographs. Like, there were not a lot of Saints fans left in the building by the time that game ended. It was like 90% Raiders fans, and it felt like basically every Saints fan left was down at the edge of the field trying to get autographs from Cam Jordan, and he took as much possible time as he could and soaked it all in. And, you know, I asked him about it after the game, and, you know, his answer is, you know, in typical Cam Jordan style, like, you know, he just cares. He cares about this team. He cares about this fan base. He doesn't want to play anywhere else, right? Like, he kind of joked one of his goals is to, whenever his career is done with the Saints, he wants to go sign with the Falcons, wait for it, and then go to one practice and say, nah, it smells in here, I quit. Just for one final Falcons stroll. And I wouldn't put it past him. Calls it given to Cedric Ellis. But this is Cam kind of talking about, okay, why did he want to spend that time talking to the fans in case this is the last time he gets to do it as a Saints player? After the game there, obviously a lot of folks asking for autographs. Was that just a little more meaningful today as you kind of took your time?
Man, it's the city of New Orleans. I mean, this is the first time where we've only won 5 games, you know, possible 6 now. This will be the worst record I've ever had in as a Saint. When we win next week, we'll be 6-11. Never been there. Never lost 7 games in a row. Never done whatever. I'm just appreciative of all the fans that have came out and supported, you know, spent their good money, spent their time coming to support us, cheering the way they do, trying to, you know, get taking our backs up against the world. And, you know, it's beyond just us. You know, the city of New Orleans has always rocked with us. Even in a piss poor season like this one, there's still all the TTs, the mamas, and the pawpaws, and, you know, and the parents out there that's taking care of us. So I got nothing but love for it. So I was trying to show a little appreciation. And if it is the last one, then I'm gonna go out my way anyways.
Shout out to Cam for knowing the word parents, which I did not. Apparently means godparents. I was like, what? When he said it, I was like, what? I've been in the Cajun country for a while, but even that one missed me. But no, I just thought it was cool. And I just think, you know, if you've been around this team, if you've been a fan of this team, everyone has a Cam Jordan story. Everyone should appreciate what he's done for this team, whether it's over after year 14, whether it gets to year 16, whatever. You know, you're not going to see another Cam Jordan, at least not for a long time. He's going to be in the Ring of Honor. He's going to be in the Team Hall of Fame. Probably a Hall of Famer. You know, I think that's a question that is going to be more interesting to talk about when he ever does retire, when you get to the final numbers. But I sure feel like when you retire as a team's franchise sack leader, and, you know, not getting to a Super Bowl was probably the biggest black mark on his resume for that. But again, it's like you look at that 2018 NFC Championship, and how do you blame anyone on that roster? I kind of feel like everyone on that roster from that perspective gets at least like secondary credit for you should have got to a Super Bowl. And so I give that team, you know, and from a Super Bowl perspective, I give the players on that team, when you talk about career accolades, the same level of success I would for a team that got to the Super Bowl and lost, right? I'm not going to give them credit for winning a Super Bowl, but I will give them credit for, you know, they played, they did everything they could other than, you know, get the refs to not go temporarily insane to get to a Super Bowl. And before we close out this segment, big news. Steve Geller has logged into his computer. He's here. Steve.
Oh my goodness, I'm not locked out anymore.
How you doing?
Oh, it's a wonderful Monday from, you know, recovering after that Saints game and then being locked out of a company computer. And like you said, I was like, I don't know, do I still have a job?
I told you need to stop going to those websites.
I don't need to those websites. You just go to Twitter and everything's on there, from sex to snuff films. You can just find anything.
We're live, Steve. We're live. Okay. Okay. Before we go into the mailbag. Okay, Steve, just give me your best, you know, well, when you think Cam Jordan as a Saint, what is kind of the story you go to? Is there anything that sticks out for you as like a peak Cam Jordan memory?
Oh, absolutely. His rookie year, getting to cover him was a blast. Was a lot more. He's always been vocal, but he didn't have that filter on. He wasn't media trained, as you would say then. And it was the first matchup coming against the Atlanta Falcons. And Cam was obviously aware that the rivalry was very heated. Saints fans dislike of the Dirty Birds was so great, and all he said, I remember in the media, in the locker room, saying to the media was, "I want to destroy Matt Ryan," and my face lit up, going, "Oh my gosh, I've got a bite for sports." It's like I can't wait to use that. And just through the years, though, Cam has been so awesome on the field, off the field, and I really hope it isn't the last hoorah for him. I'm watching this video here that you put up, and yeah, what a sight to see. A guy that's always been a man of the Who Dat Nation and willing to give them time, sign autographs, and especially too all the work he's done for the kids in the community. Just an awesome overall dude. I wish we had, a roster full of Cam Jordans on this team.
Yeah, and I mean the school visits every Tuesday, like I'm always amazed by these Monday night games on the road. When they face the Chiefs, they face the Packers on the road. These guys are getting home at like, and I don't know if you did a school visit this past week because it was Christmas Eve. The schools aren't open, but the Monday night game in Kansas City, these guys get back at like 4 a.m. and you're still seeing him on, because Tuesday's the day off. Tuesday's the day that he's going to go to his school visit. He's still there. He's at like 3 hours sleep. No one would ever question like, Cam can't make it today. But he's always going to be there. And so it's cool. And you don't see that a lot anymore, especially with like free agency is so prevalent and some of these contract demands are crazy. It's tough. You don't see a lot of 14 years players getting to year 14 with one team. Even quarterbacks, even these star quarterbacks, that doesn't happen anymore. So don't take it for granted. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, and I see a lot of the folks, and that's been the general comments from Saints fans, is that they appreciate what Cam's done, but they feel like his contract is kind of not worthy of where his playing status is now. And I would be interested to see if something ends up getting reworked so he can finish out his days here. I definitely don't want to see Cam wearing another uniform. It wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
He mentioned too, I don't think I'm capable of wearing another color but black and gold. But he's like, the comment of, a soldier is going to fight somewhere.
Yeah.
And
anytime, any place.
I could see the Arizona Cardinals scooping him up, being an Arizona kid, obviously.
Yeah. If you want me to take a pay cut, go talk to my agent.
Yeah.
But no, yeah. I mean, I could tell you one thing. He's not interested in playing for a cold weather team. If you go ask him if he wants to play for the Browns, and he will give you a 4-letter, a 2-word answer with
F no.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. He once told me like they could offer me $200 million contract. I'm not going to play in Cleveland. And go to hell.
Although I wonder if like a team like Buffalo would come calling, and you look at that roster and he'd be like, maybe I could fit in over there.
I think he would rather never play football again than go play in Buffalo. I actually talked to him specifically about Buffalo because they're building a new stadium and they don't put a roof on it. And I'm like, what the hell? He's like, I know, it should be a crime. Like, this is terrible.
They do have to play in Buffalo next year, so get ready for maybe a potentially cold weather game.
Oh God, please be in September. Please be in September. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back. We're going to hit the mailbag. Going to take a slightly longer break as I go and start some of these questions. I'll let Steve do the majority of the talking because I'm losing my voice. But either way, this is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks everyone for hanging out all the way through this, as Cam Jordan put it, piss poor season. Still listening. I always appreciate that. Always appreciate everyone who reaches out. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Leave a rating, leave a review. Tell us what you'd like to see more of. We're going into year 3 of this pod.
Wow.
So, that's a long time. Is that year 3 or is it year 4? I can't even remember. I think it'll be year 4. We're finishing year 3. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, let's do it. Who dat? Go Saints. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller coming at you for what I said earlier in this podcast, Steve, is going to be our last true post-game podcast. From here on out, the season's over, and we are just talking about picking up the pieces. And speaking of picking up the pieces, Bordelais, which is a good YouTube name, says, "Welcome back, Steve. We found out earlier that you are really the glue that holds the pod together." It was funny because as I'm trying to execute these transitions of like, oh, going from the video to this, normally I'm like, oh, I'll let Steve talk for a second as I figure out what button to press. And today I'm just like trying to do that in real time. It's not easy. So I'd like you to know that has been stated.
I'm glad I could come back and at least be part of the final segment and a half there.
For sure. Monster Love, a few questions in here, but this is one that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about. He says, I love Cam, but he's stealing money. See, I don't know about that. Like, I think earlier he definitely struggled mightily last season. And, it is what it is. He was playing hurt all year. This year, DA tried to make him more of a defensive tackle earlier in the year. Todd Grantham, he's not a fan of Todd Grantham. Like that's
not at all.
He's not shy about that. And I don't know, like, I feel like since week 10, he's been the most effective Saints defensive end. So I guess maybe he's not living up to that contract in the way that you would have hoped. But I mean, there's a few guys on this roster. I know at least one person pointed out, Milton Borrell says, and Granderson isn't stealing money. And, Carl Granderson's kind of like, for whatever reason, no one talks about him. But you look at his numbers. This is a guy who got paid last year.
Yeah.
I expected more. He's got 5.5 sacks. I don't know if he's had the impact. Like Chase Young, like I expected that tandem. Like the Saints really leaned into that tandem throughout a lot of this year. It's one of the reasons Cam wasn't on the field over the first 9 weeks, really. And
you've mentioned that everyone's been healthy, so it's like a head scratcher.
Yeah, like you haven't seen guys constantly popping up on the injury report. Chase Young got sick a few weeks ago, but that defensive end group, that I was really bullish on that defensive end group coming into the season. I thought, man, they are going to wreck games. They are going to be the reason this Saints defense is able to impact, the NFC South and win a bunch of games. And, I never expected a ton out of the offense just because of, the depth and whatever. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that defensive end group has really let me down. And it includes Carl. Like, and because Cam's coming off the season where why would you expect a ton out of him to begin with? 4 sacks, 5 sacks, whatever he has, 30 tackles. Like, that's a reasonable number for a guy that you've given up on, right?
Yeah, the biggest thing is, and I haven't gone through the film to do so much in-depth study with, but the whole D-line, obviously, the run defense this year has been unacceptable. And that was something that Cam would hang his hat on is, yes, he can rush the passer, but man, oh man, he was so stout against the run, but nobody in that group has been this year.
No, and I just think the emphasis hasn't been there. And that's something that Cam, we talked about this earlier in the pod, but that's something Cam has been very frustrated about.
Yeah.
Like everyone's talking about sacks and pressures. And meanwhile, there's been 600-yard rushes against this team. And when this defense was rocking, you weren't allowing 100-yard rushers. It didn't happen to you.
Who in their right mind was picking up Amir Abdullah before yesterday's game?
I said this earlier in the pod. Like there was a point that I had to look up and be like, is this the same Amir Abdullah, or have I been mistakenly calling him Amir Abdullah and he's really like Kenny Abdullah or something?
Adam Abdullah.
Sean Abdullah, like Sean Tucker. I don't know, but no, it is Amir Abdullah, the 10-year NFL veteran who's played in 140 games and had never before cracked 100 records. Saints did that for him. Good for them. Steel Bill, he says they want to tank, so they won't be any better next season. Good Buria says they're tanking. The defense didn't play at all. They have their instructions. I assure you that there was no tanking involved in that game. They just were bad. Like, I wish I could tell you that the Saints came from on high and said, you guys better lose this game. Absolutely not. First of all, they would never do that. Second of all, go look at the draft order. They are basically locked into 10. Losing did nothing for them. It just set up a scenario so that if the Bears and the Raiders win and the Saints lose, that they could potentially move up to 9 or 8. And the Bears play the Packers. So
Good luck with that.
in that game, I think. Speaking of a team that I think has been told to lose, the Bears. If you watch the end of that Seahawks game, sure looked like a team that was like, we don't want to win this game. Screw this up.
Somehow Drew Lock and the Giants didn't get a memo, though.
What the hell? I started okay. People probably don't like when I complain about fantasy football. I picked up the Colts 2 weeks ago because they had against I can't remember who they played last week, but it was like the best matchup possible. And then they had the Giants. So I was like, I picked them up 2 weeks ago specifically so I could play them against the Giants
championship
game. And they got me -4 points. The Giants, the freaking Giants. We watched them. That's the same freaking Giants team that couldn't do anything against the Saints. They scored 35 points against who? What the hell happened? The Colts was playing for something. The Colts, their playoff lives were on the line, and that's what they.
No, it's a bizarro world, but that with the New York Giants right there shows you that the talk we have with tanking, it's really not existent in the NFL.
This is such a good season. If you ever want to point to and say like tanking isn't real, so many of these teams have a lot of incentive to not win these games. Look at the freaking Raiders, man. You think Raiders fans are happy that they won yesterday? Absolutely not. But who do the Raiders play this upcoming week? They play the Chargers, so they're probably not going to win that game either. Chargers definitely still playing for something.
Yeah.
So you look at the NFL draft order, and the Raiders. Let's see. I usually use Tankathon. Tankathon's the kind of the go-to for this.
Yeah,
the
I was
Raiders
looking at their mock draft yesterday.
I'm sorry?
They even have a mock draft tab on Tankathon, and I was like, let me check that out.
I don't know who runs this website, but if they do a really good job.
Yeah.
The Raiders 2 weeks ago were basically a lock for the top pick. All they had to do was not win all their games down the stretch of the season. And now they are to 8th. The difference between the number 1 pick, even if you're not picking a quarterback, to 8th is massive. The Patriots are now the number 1 pick at 3-13, but there's 4 teams at 3-13. Then there are 5 teams at 4-12, including the Raiders and the Bears. And then the Saints are actually the only NFL team at 5-11. No other team in the NFL is 5-11. And so, I mean, there's 9 teams with 4 or fewer wins, but no teams with fewer than 3 wins. So it's just a really bizarre year. But tanking isn't really going to do anything for the Saints. The Bears have lost 10 games in a row. The Bears were 4-2. Think about that. Like the Saints were 2-0, and we're like, wow, how'd things fall apart? The Bears were 4-2. They have not won since. So realistically speaking, there's not a ton that can change for the Saints. Even if they win next week and the 49ers lose, both teams will be 6. Okay, no, the 49ers play today. So even if like the Saints and the 49ers end up at 5-12, or I'm sorry, at 6-11, then the Saints will still be ahead of them because of the strength of schedule. And you know, the Bears and the Raiders are the only team with a better strength of schedule than the Saints.
Oof.
So any of these other teams, if they got to 5-12, the Saints would still be behind them. So realistically, the only thing that can happen for the Saints is they move up to 9 or 8 or stick at 10. So,
right. So
again, tanking is not really on the table here.
No,
like you might say, hey, I want to lose to maybe get a chance at the 9 or the 10 or the 8 pick, but the likelihood that even that happens is tiny.
We've heard Bobby Hebert, we've heard Deuce McAllister, we've heard current Saints players, we've heard Darren Rizzi, whoever you want. What you're putting out there on the tape, the film, whatever you want to call it now, the digital media, your game film is your resume, and it's going to stick with you. And if you're putting crap out there, you're not going to get an offer from a team to either stay in New Orleans or anywhere else. So I understand fans wanting the team to lose, but even at this point, like you mentioned, there's not going to be much fluctuation with this draft pick at the moment.
No, not at all. And
not this year, at least, unfortunately. What a year to suck.
As Foster Moreau put it, you can't sweep doo-doo under the rug because it's still going to smell like doo-doo. And I'm not cursing because I guess we had a listener who said it would be such a better podcast if you didn't swear all the time. And it's funny because one time we got criticism and we didn't swear enough. So they want us to be more like T-Bob.
Can't please them all.
Can't please them all. Some guys want the F-bomb. Some guys don't. Some, I don't know. Monster love here. And, it's funny. This goes back to a conversation we had way back in the preseason where he was like, I hate Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid sucks. And I was like, let's give him a chance. And he was like, all right, fine, let's give him a chance. So I appreciate that he kind of called back to that. But he says, hey, I know we had different opinions on Kool-Aid, but what do you think so far now that he has a few games under his belt? I think he's struggled. But I also find it difficult to make any real evaluation on a lot of these guys because the entire defense, it feels like, has been put in bad situations for the last 5 weeks. And I just don't think Joe Woods is a defensive coordinator. I don't think he's necessarily capable of coming up with a good defensive plan for these guys. And so I think he's being undermined a little bit by that. I also don't think he's played particularly well. So I'm, I don't know. It's tough. There's going to be a lot of evaluations to make on these players. I've seen a lot of people saying, hey, the issue is the Saints defense is old and they're not good enough. I don't know. I feel like you have a lot of young players out there. So you're talking about Cam, DeMario, and Tyron.
Right.
Those are your old players. That means 8 players on the defense are not old, are under the age of 30. So I don't think the age is the issue. I think execution and play is the issue. And, I think Kool-Aid has been picked on a little bit. Alontae Taylor started off well, but he's fallen off a little bit. And just in general, I just don't think that guys are playing well. So I don't know. I'm not out on him. I still think he's a really talented player, and we'll see what happens when the new defensive scheme gets installed, because I can guarantee you we will have a new defensive coordinator next year, regardless of what else happens. But I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm right with you. With it's really hard to give a solid evaluation of a rookie this season for all that has gone wrong around him and the madness. I will say, at least though, if you want to look at a rookie, I feel like Taliese Fuaga has shown the promise and that ability to live up to those first round expectations. I don't know what to make of Kool-Aid yet. It's been an up and down year, but I mean, who can't you say that about on this team for sure?
Even Fuaga, I feel like has kind of
he's had his moments too where it's like, what is going on?
He had a really strong first 12, 13 games. The last few weeks, I feel like he's I can't remember. He had one really strong game recently, but I feel like he's had his struggle moments. Like he didn't play well in this past game. So we'll see. But I do really like Fuaga. I'm not saying that I'm out on Fuaga either.
No.
But he's got a ways to go from a developmental standpoint. So that's really all it is you got to see these guys and say, okay, what did you struggle with? Bring in
I'll say with Kool-Aid though, the Cajun Cannon Bobby Aber refuses to call him Kool-Aid though. He's going, I'm calling him by his birth name, JaQuincy, until he earns the nickname Kool-Aid. I was like,
on him JaQuincy.
Okay.
Bobby Aber has committed to saying JaQuincy.
No, he's been saying McKinstry. That's it. But I told him like his real name's JaQuincy, and he ignored that though. He's like, oh, he's got to earn Kool-Aid.
DA had the same policy, and DA's gone now. Anyway, well, and it's another one. 992 RAS says where 2006 is different because it kind of talked about what did those drafts have in common? 2006, 2017 is that you had all these picks and you made them, and you hit on a bunch of them, and you just established a core of young, talented players that you kind of built around.
Yes.
Is where 2006 is different is they still had some pretty good players while being able to sign players plus the drafted. And I don't think the Saints team's issue is they don't have any talented players. I really don't. I think they have talented players. The issue is they've been on offense, they've been hurt, and on defense, they haven't been playing well enough. And the defense has been the biggest letdown of this season.
Oh man, without a doubt.
And I don't know, I'm gonna look at this 2005 Saints roster and let's see the players on here that were like, this is the star player. I know Deuce was on that team. Deuce was a good player to build around, but even he was getting toward the end of his career at that point. Joe Horn, okay. Aaron Brooks,
yeah.
Dante Stallworth, sure.
Meh.
The Charles Bentley was your center. Wayne Gandy was your left tackle. Jamal Brown was your right tackle as a rookie. So, okay. Darren Howard was your left defensive end. I kind of put Darren Howard in that same range as, he's not at Cam, but maybe Cam at this point in his career. Mike McKenzie, Fred Thomas, Josh Bullock, Dwight Smith, Cedric Hodge, Charles Grant, they're like quality players, but you're not looking at that and saying like these are elite. Like this is a roster that you were just like, all right, it's set up to succeed. You had a few young players and you're there. No, you had a quarterback in Drew Brees a couple years later, and suddenly you're like, you're right there. So I don't know. I think a lot of it
I
has to
think
do with
that's the key part is adding a Drew Brees. Obviously, I mean, you look at that, and he made so much a difference, no matter who was catching passes from him.
Exactly. And that's why when I say like Spencer Rattler, I think played better, but I'm still drafting quarterbacks until I find a guy. It's because you got to find that guy, and it's hard to. You got to just keep throwing darts at the board, man. And maybe Spencer, he's got experience this year. He goes into the offseason, he applies the lessons he learned. He comes back and he turns into a player that's like, wow, I think we have something here. Great, but I'm still drafting quarterbacks until I get the answer on that. And I know there's been a few. Speaking of Spencer Rattler, Teddy Bear says Spencer doesn't have a touch pass. Dude just throws fastballs. Staccanova, big Derek Carr guy, says, have you considered this season? The reason Rattler has only completed 55% of his passes, which is worse than any Carr Saints performance, is that Rattler doesn't throw a really catchable ball. I mean, I do think that, and I think that both those comments go back to the same thing is, yeah, I do think that one thing that Spencer has struggled with at this point in his career is understanding when to throw the fastball and when to just get it out there. And that's something that I think Derek is an underrated skill of his. I asked him about this at some point, maybe last year, I think. And he said he probably throws hard maybe 15% of the time. Like he's always kind of weighing, okay, am I going 80%? Am I going 60%? What is the throw I'm making right now? And I think that's something that you learn over time at the NFL level. I don't think it's Spencer is incapable of throwing a touch pass or a more easily catchable ball. It's that you're a rookie, everything's going 100 miles an hour, and you're like, get the ball out. and
Everything's just in rapid motion for him.
Yeah. Sometimes like when you're getting sacked constantly, like he has been, now it's up to 21 sacks in 5 starts. Like your clock is sped up and you're just like, if I try to take a little off this, my motion is going to be a little longer. I need to get it out. And so now I do think that's been an issue. I think you're onto something there with the completion percentage, but there was at least 3 balls in that game. One was to Juwan Johnson on the opening drive where it's like nothing about this pass is uncatchable. He catches it and it gets punched out. And it's like, that's nothing. Like the throw is not the issue. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the second half. I struggle sometimes. There was we talked about this earlier. He rolled out, got it to him, caught the ball, punched out. MVS, this is not really the same situation, but MVS is not the guy I want to lay out to dry in the middle of the field, especially because he's already dealing with an injury. So I'm sure he's not thrilled about that throw late in the game, but he rifled it in there. The ball that's caught gets not, he takes a big hit and he drops it. So like that's not an issue of touch passes, right? So I think and yes, Derek's a 10-year veteran, 11-year veteran. He's going to have better success in those situations. But I think part of the issue is like the guys you're throwing to are not making the catches. And that's true when Derek's on the field too. Like you see guys put the ball on the ground, but I don't know. I'm not overreacting to the completion percentage right now. And saying like, oh, he can't make these throws.
Yeah. There's been some times where like, wow, that was a nice pass by Rattler, but I don't think we've ever talked about or we're gushing over his touch, which definitely seems like something he needs to work on.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Like that's, if I had to pick, like if I had to list, all of the things that I need Spencer to work on over the offseason, and that's one of them. It's like just kind of understanding time, situation, what kind of ball you need right here versus what kind of ball you have to throw. And to be fair, it's not like he's sitting back in the pocket comfortably, like, okay, I can throw a touch pass here. Yeah, let me see what's going on. I had one person say like, oh, he has no pocket awareness. Like, guys, there was no pocket most of the time. It's not like you're saying like, oh, he's scrambling. Like that was a criticism I had early in the season is he would see pressure and he would panic and not allow the blockers to just kind of move a guy out of danger out of like a dangerous area, he would kind of step up into it. He wouldn't feel comfortable. I don't think that was the issue in that game. I think when he scrambled, he needed to scramble. So yeah, pocket awareness could be better too, but just there's nothing went well in that game to the point that I can be like, this is the issue. This is the issue.
It's sad too, because we've talked about going into the Raiders game, how depleted they were without a ton of starters, but they sure looked at full strength, sadly, in that home finale.
Yeah. They played well. Even like the Saints played poorly, the Raiders did play well. So you got to give them some credit for that. Like, and I hate hearing like, oh, give them credit. It drives me nuts. But the Raiders did play well in that game. So, and I think that's more of just like Antonio Pierce, I think, is fighting for his job too. And so, winning these games is important for him. So he had those guys motivated on like 3 hours sleep. So that's good for him. Jerry G says, on Christmas Day, I reached 500 subscribers. Congratulations, bud. And I mean that. Congratulations. 504 Coast says the Who Dat Nation will boycott. There's like 55 more comments in here. The one I want to answer before we move on is the Mickey Loomis teardown question. Hey,
that's a big one.
how much of a change should you make? And here we go. Bordelise says a beatdown in primetime by the Packers, then getting embarrassed by the 3-12 Raiders a week later. These have to be the conditions under which even Mickey might not survive. And I don't know. Now, personally, and I'm just speaking for me, I would seriously push for a restructured front office. If you dropped me on the ceiling right above the Saints front office and you said, hey, you make whatever change you need.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think like, all right, fire everybody, start from scratch is the answer. I think that's just something that we say because it's easier than admitting that it's a lot more complicated than simply just starting from scratch, because starting from scratch isn't solving your problems. It is eliminating everything and introducing a whole new set of variables that will inevitably create different problems or the same problem because you didn't think about it critically enough to fix the problems that existed. And to me, I think what you have to do as an organization is look at everything and make the adjustments that are important to make. And if I'm restructuring the front office, I'm not firing Mickey, but I am asking him to give up some control. You have a lot of guys in that front office right now that have a lot of experience. And the problem is, like, I can say this, I don't know exactly what tasks are handed to this person versus this person versus this person. Every time a signing goes poorly, it's like Mickey screwed up. Who's to say that was even a signing he championed? Who's to say he's not already listening to people in the building who said, I like this guy, let's hire this guy, right? Like, that's how a good operation works. So just taking Mickey out of that equation is not necessarily solving that problem. It's the question of your priorities. So I don't know. Like, I do think that when things go the way they have gone, you do have to make serious changes, and you have to, from a philosophical perspective,
right,
seriously consider changing how you do things, how you make decisions, who gets to make those decisions, who has significant input in the decisions as they're made. But you can't just tear everything down to the studs every time it doesn't work. And I don't know. These conversations are probably already being had. Who's to say what happens with Mickey and where you go from here with the decision makers in that organization? You already have two vice GMs right now. So like, there's a lot of chefs in that kitchen. Maybe there's too many chefs in that kitchen, right?
I know a lot of folks too. The fall guy might be a guy like Jeff Ireland, but I do think that talent evaluation and scouting, they need help with, because there's too many of these early picks that have not been panning out. And I know there's circumstances around a lot of these guys, whether it's injuries or not, but there's, when it comes down to it, it's still an excuse, and I don't want to hear it. I just want you to pick the right guy. You know, we're seeing a player like Brock Bowers on the field yesterday with the Raiders, and it's like, well, crap, why can't we have a guy like that?
Well, Well, I mean, for one reason, he wasn't on the board when the Saints picked. That does make it difficult.
But I don't want to hear after a first round pick, though. He's a developmental guy. We're working on him to get that full potential that he has. We need plug and play dudes for sure.
I agree with that. But I also think one of the issues the Saints have been having, and this, again, it's a far more complex answer than people want to hear, which is get rid of Jeff Ireland, hire a new scouting staff, do whatever, is I feel like there's been a disconnect from the scouting staff to the coaching staff. And by that, I mean, like, you couldn't find a spot for Zach Bond, the defensive, a defensive player of the year candidate right now. Like one of the picks we talk about when say the scouts suck is, oh, they picked Zach Bond in the second round and he's been terrible. Well, apparently there's some talent there that wasn't mined, right? You couldn't find a spot to play him. The scouts didn't screw up. The developmental staff and the coaching staff screwed up, right? And the personnel staff. So, like, if I'm a scout, I'm like, I feel like I did a good job there, but I've been getting raked over the coals for it for 4 years, and now that guy's over in Philadelphia starring. Caden Ellis, another example of a guy that's like, okay, we let him walk, but he's pretty good, isn't he? Huh?
That was a late round gem too.
Is that a scouting problem or is that a personnel problem?
No, you're right on that for sure.
Trey Hendrickson. Hey, we didn't miss on that pick, but we let him walk. Is that a scouting problem? No. And so how often are your scouts identifying players that go on to succeed and either the coaches do not play them or do not develop them to a level that you need, or the draft heads, the people who actually make the drafting decisions, aren't necessarily listening to the scout heads? A couple years ago, Jeff Ireland stood there at the Senior Bowl and said, I want a dual threat quarterback. I think dual threat quarterbacks are the way to go. And you went out and you drafted Jake Haener. Like, so I don't know. Like, is it a scouting issue or is it a decision-making issue or is it a coaching issue? You're solving one of those problems no matter what, in that you have completely reworked this coaching staff. And I think Dennis Allen's stubbornness to play these players and develop these players that the scouts have identified is one of the issues. And we're seeing that again in Isaiah Foskey. Like, who's to say Isaiah Foskey can't play? I haven't seen him play. We haven't gotten an opportunity to see him play. Is he going to be another guy that doesn't play at all here and then goes somewhere else and plays well? I don't know. We haven't seen it. So that's kind of where I am, is like, I think it's far too simple to just sit here and say, tear it down, fire everyone, start from scratch. But I do need the Saints to be willing to make sweeping moves and major changes at key spots if they are identified as issues. We are past the point that you can allow people to stay in a position just because they've been there forever. And that's where I am. I don't think it necessarily has to be like, people want me to sit here and be Matt Moscona and say, fire Mickey and blah, blah, blah. He has one move and that's it. It's yell loud and think about it after. Okay. I'm not going to be that. I'm going to be critical of the draft strategy, of the personnel department, of the development of the coaching staff, but I'm not going to yell what people want to hear because it's the thing that's right in front of me right now. And so that's where I am. And I get people telling me, like, why aren't you yelling fire Mickey Loomis, fire Mickey Loomis? Because I think firing Mickey Loomis, while being cathartic for a lot of people, because that's what they've been yelling about for 5 years now, isn't necessarily going to solve all the Saints' problems. It's just going to create different problems, and you're going to have to figure out how to do things around that. Like, firing Dennis Allen's what everyone wanted, right? They fired Dennis Allen. Did things get better? Was Sunday what you dreamed about when you fired Dennis Allen? Or did it actually get worse because the defense fell off a cliff and you didn't make it to the end of the season, and now you're getting veteran players throwing temper tantrums on the sidelines during games? Like, so I don't know. Like, we're right where we were when Dennis Allen was the coach in week 9. Just took a couple weeks to get back to that point. So again, the simplest solution, the most cathartic solution, the solution that everyone's yelling about, isn't always the answer, but you do need to consider and take action when those things become the solution that you find. So I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, but here we are.
No, definitely the Hoodats are getting louder and louder with their displeasure and wanting Loomis gone, and we're even getting now to the point where poor Mrs. B, they're saying that, you know, she needs to sell the team and do everyone a favor.
That is one thing that I will stand on a hill for. Gail Benson is not the problem with this organization. Like, the best case
I guess
scenario,
people are mad at her sticking with Loomis, I guess it comes down to.
I guess, but she's the reason DA got fired, so you got to give her credit for that, right? Like, she stuck her nose in and said, "Hey, this has to happen, guys. Let's do it." But again, I say this a lot, and it's true, and I will go to my grave believing this. The best case scenario for NFL, NBA, baseball, whatever, professional sport team ownership is an owner who cuts the checks and doesn't complain about it, supports the people she puts in position to do their jobs, and then gets the hell out of the way, right? Because she's not even the one who's supposed to be making those decisions. It's Dennis Lauscher. It's the organization who's supposed to be deciding. Like Gail's not the one who has to go fire Mickey. If someone was to fire Mickey, like, that's not her role. That would be Dennis Lauscher. It'd be the brain trust role to do that. There are people above Mickey in between Mickey and Gail. It's not like Mickey Gail.
Yeah,
And
I guess if it gets
know.
to her saying that, shit's really gone bad.
Right. Now she would be the person who puts her foot down and says, "Hey, this decisions like this need to be made," and that's what she did. But you don't want that to happen. That's a bad ownership scenario. That's a recipe for disaster. And so I don't know. I will. I'm not directing anything at Gail. I do not have an issue with Gail whatsoever. I think she has been a positive presence for this team. And it's the people who she's put in positions to make big decisions and make those difficult decisions who have to be willing to do that. And whether there's cronyism or nepotism involved, that needs to be washed away. And everyone needs to be put on a serious evaluation of whether they should still be in the job that they're in. Just like the players, just like the coaching staff, just like the front office. And I know I say that from an insulated bedroom in my house. But you go 5-11, 5-12. You have your worst season in 2 decades. The give these people the benefit of the doubt idea goes out the window, and that's where I am right now.
When did you first officially start covering the Saints?
Well, I mean, I've been here since 2016, but I would say I started covering the team in person because I did cover the team digitally for a while, but I wouldn't say I. Like actually was in a room where a player could punch me if they wanted to until 2018.
My first year full-time covering the team was 2009, and what a year that was. I got so spoiled real quick. And yeah, so this season is definitely a huge Debbie Downer disappointment. I wasn't around for those lean years, obviously, that some folks are used to, the dark days of the Saints before Sean arrived. So yeah, 2009, they went to the Super Bowl. I was, at training camp and everything, practices, even, post, everything was golden. And yeah, we've seen some drop off there. We mentioned a lot those 7 and 9 years that they ended up coming back from, but definitely nothing to this magnitude. And I'm curious to see how overall they respond, just because I do think you need to make some major changes. I don't think Mickey Loomis is going to go anywhere. Maybe he gets a altered role in this franchise, but as a whole, you're not going to hear, "Oh, the Saints have parted ways with Mickey Loomis." I don't believe that at all.
No, if he retired, even if they did, he would be, Mickey is stepping away. Mickey's retiring. There's no scenario where they'd just be like, fire him, but either way, but that's going to be something that we talk about extensively over the next month, the next 2 months, over the entire offseason. The next episode of this week, I kind of want to come up with I have no interest in previewing this Bucs matchup. The Bucs can talk about that all they want. So I think we should come up with an idea of hey, let's come up with a roadmap for how we want this offseason to go, and our ideal offseason, and we can talk about that. I think that would be a good episode to kind of prime it, in terms of what are the big contract decisions they have to make, What are the draft picks? Where are you from an asset perspective? Which veteran players could move on or could retire, or whatever, could be trade options. That's what I want to talk about next episode. But I think we did it. I think that's, this is our way too long podcast, so people can complain about that again.
Well, I made things extended probably a little bit more joining you late. So
yeah, you weren't here for most of it. So there's like 2 episodes here.
There you go.
I was getting ready to end that segment. I was going to do a quick mailbag, and instead you showed up.
Sorry.
And oh man, we're going to do this again.
Damn, he got unhacked.
Yeah. We could probably split this up into a podcast where it's just me and then a podcast where it's and it would be like 2 full legit podcasts. But that's it. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks everyone for sticking around through this entire just god awful season. Appreciate everyone who listens, everyone who leaves comments. I wish I could have gotten to more of them, but we did whatever we could. And yeah, any parting thoughts, Steve?
Hey, just go out there, lose to the Bucks, and let them win the division again, so Atlanta doesn't have a chance. At least we could stick it to them.
Again, my ideal scenario, and I talked about this last week, and there's a very real chance for it to happen. Saints go out there and play like gangbusters in the first half. I know it's unlikely, but like they're up 14-0 at halftime, and Falcons fans are like, "This is actually going to happen," and then they bench everybody, which I don't know who's left to bench, but whatever. And then lose to the Bucks, and the Falcons are just like, "Oh no, the Saints are the worst. Boo hoo me."
Yeah, a la what Philly did. Exactly.
Yeah, that's my dream scenario.
I hope it pans out. We need some kind of joy.
Maybe we can get the Bucks on board. Be like, guys, just sell for the first half. Make it look realistic, and then we'll do the funniest thing possible.
Right. We're gonna rewrite the script that the NFL script writers put out.
Yeah, you're gonna have a 15-yard field goal, which doesn't even exist, to win the game, and you're gonna run a fake and get tackled at the 1. Game over. Falcons with playoffs. That's the dream. Anyway, who dat? Go Saints. Bees y'all. Appreciate y'all as always. Make sure to subscribe. We'll be back at you later in the week.
Who dat, folks? Happy New Year.
Oh my gosh, it's Happy New Year time.